Hi there, and welcome to the HR Podcast. This is Linda Misegadis
and Cyndi Manuel, and we'll be your co-hosts. After spending years working in and with HR, we thought, why not start a podcast to support the important HR community? We believe the way things have always been done isn't necessarily what's going to work in the future. So we're diving into topics that support HR and working women as they navigate the future of work. We're talking about professional growth and also how we can support each other as human beings.
We can't wait to bring you insights from HR experts, thought leaders, and inspiring women who are making a real difference in their organization and communities. They'll share their journeys and tips on balancing work and life in a better way. We're excited to learn alongside you and hope you'll pick up some great takeaways from tips and tricks to worksheets that you can actually use in your daily life. So grab your favorite beverage
or lace up your walking shoes and join us for the HR Her Resources podcast.
Hey everyone, welcome to another episode of the Her Resources podcast. I'm excited to be back in the studio with my co-host Cyndi Manuel.
Hello, how are you, Linda?
I'm doing good. I think winter has finally arrived in Colorado, right?
Oh my, yes.
Yeah,
I've got a blanket on my lap.
I have a Frenchie with a blanket on my lap. So,
that's better. That's better.
He's still not feeling very good after his surgery. And so he's but yes, that keeps my lap nice and warm. So
there you go.
Yes. Well, we are so happy to have Ali Mercier back in the studio with us today, and we're going to be talking about self-advocacy, and we're super excited for this. So for those of you who don't know Ali, let me give you a little bit of her background so you know who she is. Ali is 5 years into her career as a public sector executive at UKG. Ali started her career in youth development, where she worked serving New York City schools for over 10 years in nonprofit administration, working in a myriad of administrative roles at the organization, as well as representing the organization as one of their national presenters on her original thought leadership, focusing on futurism. After leaving New York City, Ali had the unplanned opportunity to be a stay-at-home mom. During this time, Ali went to a local call for volunteers with Sandy Hook Promise. This is really near and dear to our hearts. When she was immediately brought on as one of their gold standard presenters in gun violence and suicide prevention. At UKG, she not only serves in her sales capacity, but is on the board of directors for our nonprofit, the People Inspired Giving Foundation, as well as a member of all of our employee resource groups, an active member of our sales internship program. Her core values are kindness, curiosity, and sincerity. And Ali lives with her husband, who I got the pleasure of meeting back in earlier this month, actually, which was amazing. His name is Phil Caminetti.
It's very close. My friend Andrina thought I was hanging out with three guys, Phil, Cam, and Eddie, for a long time. Cam and Eddie. Mm-hmm.
Cam and Eddie. And Allie. Quinn and Cole and Pups, Ada and Josie. Welcome back to the podcast. Yay! Allie, we are so happy to have you back.
Yay! I'm so glad to be back. Glad to be with you all this morning.
Yeah, no, well, and it's nice and chilly where you're at too. So, so we can, all be cold together, which is
That's right.
Yeah.
New Hampshire is embracing winter this mid-January, and I'm here for it. I'm happy for New Hampshire to be embracing winter in a mid-Jan season.
Yeah. Now, New Hampshire winters, like Colorado winters, are a nice little hidden gem in that the sun shines most of the year here.
Mm-hmm.
And so even in the wintertime, it's not a dreary kind of winter. Like I've been to New England in the wintertime and it's dreary. But what's New Hampshire like? Is it dreary in the wintertime?
It's pretty dreary. Yes, I think that's the correct way to say it. But I try to, I'm not sure if I'm going to say it correctly, but I try to do, I think it's the Finnish thing, which is hike, where it's like embracing the cozy. It's HYGGE. And it's embracing the cozy darkness of winter as like a comfort. Okay. And so I just try to do a reframe. I manipulate my own self is what I'm trying to say. Yeah. And it's just like, instead of being like, it's too dark, it's like embrace the comfort of warmth in winter.
The comfort and cozy.
I'll just trick myself.
That's right.
Self-advocacy.
Self-advocacy. That's it. Absolutely.
It's all around us. It's all around
Yes.
us.
No. Well, before we launch into our podcast, I just want to bring a couple of stats to just kind of set the stage for what we're going to be talking about a little bit. I'm just kind of defining when we think about self-advocacy. So in the workplace, a lot of it happens in wage gap and promotion disparities, right? So women are less likely to negotiate their salaries than men. Only 34% of women negotiate their first job offer compared to 46% of men, which can result in an average loss of $1 million over a lifetime. Ladies, negotiate your salaries. Employees who advocate for themselves in performance reviews or promotions are 70% more likely to receive a raise or promotion. It also says there was a study done by McKinsey and leanin.org where they found that 60% of women hesitate to share their accomplishments of work for fear of being seen as boastful. 35% of employees, regardless of gender, avoid asking for help or expressing their opinions due to fear of gender. That was a Gallup survey that was done. And, we've talked about this before, imposter syndrome. About 70% of people experience imposter syndrome as well. When we think about self-advocacy in marginalized groups, like representation and leadership, for example, women hold only 28% of senior leadership roles worldwide, despite making up nearly half of the workforce. Advocacy for mentorship and career advancement is so crucial. People of color often face additional barriers to self-advocacy, with 62% of Black employees feeling they must work harder than their colleagues to advance their careers. And only 21% of individuals with disabilities report that they feel empowered to self-advocate in the workplace, highlighting the need for more inclusive environments. And so some of the reasons why do we need to talk about this, it's all around building confidence, closing gaps, improving well-being. It says, 35% lower levels of stress and 22% higher job satisfaction for employees with just that better mental health. And then just the organizational benefits as well. Companies that promote a culture of self-advocacy see 21% higher productivity. So there you go, Ali. We've set the stage for you to introduce self-advocacy and why you care about this.
Yeah, it's worth it. I mean, I'm glad you have all those stats to back it up, but it really, it's such a superpower. And I expect that when folks are able to harness their own way of self-advocating, the one that they feel comfortable with, then they'll just see themselves take off, because I just know what a superpower it is.
I always think too, especially going back to what you were saying in those stats, Linda, when I hear a woman representing her achievements, in my mind, the first thing I think is, oh, good for you. You're so brave. When I shouldn't really think that. I should just be like, good for you, yay, but not so brave. How brave are you?
That is so true. And sometimes you see a different reaction. And this is why I think it supports that stat, is that a lot of times when we do hear women talking about it, we think, pipe down. You're sounding a little like
uppity. Uppity.
Yeah,
I've been called uppity more than once in my life, and I don't mind. I'm okay to be a little uppity. That's okay with me.
Yes, I like that. No. Well, why don't you set this
exactly.
Right? How brave.
Exactly. Please. I'll take uppity anytime.
That's it. Ali, why don't you set the stage with a little story for everybody around self-advocacy?
Yeah. So thank you, Linda. I appreciate you.
Yeah.
I think there's a couple of places where self-advocacy was really instilled in me from a young person, as a young person. One was, my mom was always very hyper aware of victim mindset. So anytime I went into like, Mom, you're making me feel bad, she's like, no one can make you feel bad if you don't let them. So there was always that frame.
Good for her.
For me, it's very empowering to young people,
Absolutely.
right? And at the moment, you're kind of like, screw you. You actually need me. Right? But like over time, over time, you're like, oh, I do have that power, and mindfulness is super, blah, blah, blah. But so that foundation is huge. But then I had an incident happen when I was in 9th grade. So I grew up in a tiny bedroom farm community that I also live in now. That's a coincidence. Never planned to move back home. It's okay.
Funny how
it's
we
beautiful.
find ourselves back. Yes.
It's been amazing with a totally different person, but I'm here. So growing up here, when I was in 8th grade, we used to go to another small town next door to go to high school. And halfway through our 8th grade year, the other town told us that we were no longer welcome and that they had to find a school for us kids in Litchfield. And so we got sent to Manchester, New Hampshire, to one of the schools in Manchester, New Hampshire. And again, as these very young, naive farm kids, we were kind of like, eyes open. It's like sophomores pregnant. And we were like, wow, sex is allowed? Like, we had no idea what that world was like. But in this experience, in this world, I was in a gym class, and I'm an athlete. I played soccer most of my life. And in this gym class, the gym teacher at the end of the semester, there was 90 kids. So I understand why this happened. Most of the girls would sit out. At the end of the semester, all the boys got A's and all the girls got C's.
Oh my gosh.
And I got my grade and I was livid because I participated every time that there was a class. I played soccer, I played volleyball, I played whatever was on the agenda. I played basketball. I'm 5'2". I still did these things, right? And so when I got this C, I came home to my mom and I was like, Mother, you would not believe this ish. And my mom was like, tell me what's going on. And I was like, this gym teacher is sexist and he gave all the girls C's and all the boys A's. And she's like, that doesn't seem right. I'm like, no, it's so wrong. So, Mom, call the school and fix it. And my mother, being the gift that she is, said, what would I have to do? And I'm like, well, call the guidance counselor and ask the guidance counselor to talk to the gym teacher to fix it. She's like, are you afraid of your guidance counselor? And I was like, no, he's really nice. She's like, okay, so why don't you call the guidance counselor?
Oh, good lesson.
Yeah.
It was Cyndi, but again, it was the moment for me where I was like, but Mom.
Right. You don't do anything for me, Mother.
You fixed it. There's a couple other girls that also play and their moms are calling, so why do I have to do the work? But what ended up happening is that I went to the guidance counselor and my mom, awesomely, she was like, no, you go down this path. And if you run into any trouble, if you run into any resistance, I'm in your corner. Call me in at that point. But until you run into any issues, you've got this.
I like that. That's awesome.
And so I found myself in the small guidance counselor's office. So me as a 9th grade young lady with this gentleman guidance counselor, this gentleman gym teacher, advocating for myself.
Wow.
Right? In a way where the gym teacher was like, I disagree. And he ended up negotiating me down to an A-, which was specifically rude, but still I got my A. And I was able to really see, oh, if you speak up for yourself, like you're safe. And that's lent itself, like it's kind of a false reality that I've created for myself that I'm not mad about. Because my husband and I were having this conversation in the car the other day of women often feeling like prey. And when we were listening to this podcast that was talking about it, and I've never felt like prey. That has never been who I've never identified as that. That does not resonate with me. And it's not because I'm like a large, strong person, right? Like I just, I will not be preyed upon.
That's not your mindset.
No.
Yeah.
No. I don't see myself as that victim. And I won't see myself as that.
What a good lesson from your mom.
And oh gosh, yeah.
How brave of her too, right? Yeah. I mean, as a mom myself, I know there are times where I'm like, you got this, that was the grade you got, or that was the experience that you had. You've got this. And I love too that she said, I'm in your corner. Tag me in at any time. Yeah. That is like the best mom moment. That's so great.
I love that.
She's awesome. Well, and she comes from, my meme was really incredible in that way. My meme was with so she had 5 kids. And before Mr. Rogers was around, she was like, no one will ever, if someone tried to be you, Mary, no one will ever be anything as good as you when you try to be the best version of you. No one could ever try. You were so special just being who you are. That's how my meme talked.
That's amazing.
And also things like can't is dead, right? There's no such thing as can't. Like if there's a will, there's a way. My Pepe used to say, the Bergeron, her side of the family, warrior cry was, we'll see. And it still is. It still is. My sister and I will still be with our husbands. We'll be like, we'll see. And
I love that. That is great.
We know what ends up happening.
Yes. You come from generations of very strong advocating people.
That's
so
right.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
So, Ali, now probably more than ever, self-advocacy is really important, right? And so without becoming too political, I would say right now there's the movement to remove conversations around diversity, equity, inclusion. There's a lot of talk about our country being too woke, and that's why we're moving in this direction. So let's look at that a little bit and say, okay, well, if that's the case, and that now the environment we're in is that we're all equal, and so everyone is going to have equal rights at every opportunity. So that's why we don't need to have any of those programs anymore. So tell us a little bit how important self-advocacy is going to play in that role, because more than ever, you're going to have to self-advocate or you may find yourself being left behind.
Yeah. So it's going to be huge because we don't have organizations necessarily as incentivized to be finding the folks for it, which means that we as the individuals that create the diversity that makes the best decisions for an organization, like that's my reality. I'm like, okay, you want to do merit best hires? That's cool. Just make sure you have a really diverse group of candidates making the decisions.
Yeah.
It could be the best meritocracy as far as like of that, but you still need to make sure we have age differences, we have gender differences, we have race differences, we have cultural differences, because it's only through that we'll arrive at the best decision. And so
that's right.
What I hate to do, and I'll talk about this from a personal perspective about my PTSD. I had a nurse practitioner in my second pregnancy who, while I told her that I had complex PTSD, often because I'm articulate and good at self-advocacy, right? And good at I'm resourceful, right? Even though I communicate, hi, just FYI, I have PTSD. These are my triggers. People are like, we see you and we decide that's not really true. And they can trigger my PTSD. And this nurse practitioner did that during my first pregnancy. And when I talked to my executive coach about that, she was like, look, you have a decision. You have an opportunity right now to educate this woman. And you don't owe this woman anything. And you're in this space where you are in an oppressed kind of population that has to advocate, but you don't have to do that. So I share that framework from the perspective that I want to make sure I'm not dismissing how challenging it is that diverse candidates, meaning candidates of color, candidates in the hidden workforce, candidates with disabilities, candidates that are older, candidates that are women, that the challenges of advocating for yourself are very real and can be a very huge burden.
Yeah.
And that relentlessness of embracing it anyway in the opportunities that you can take it. I say, Nike, just do it. Like, I'm like, go for it every time is my kind of advice in that arena.
Like it.
I remember when we first met you, Ali, last year, or when I first met you. Linda's known you for a while now. You said, people might dismiss me, but they would be foolish to do so. And that has always stuck with me. And I'm like, ooh, I love that as sort of something to keep in the back of my mind, that to me, that's the crux, like that's the heart and soul of self-advocacy. People might be, looking and thinking they should dismiss me, but they'd be foolish to do so.
It's so right. And I've been listening to Mel Robbins, I believe is her name. And she has this new philosophy.
Big fans, huh, Linda?
Cyndi and I are always talking about Mel Robbins. Yep.
The let them philosophy of let them dismiss you and then let me continue to advocate for myself. Just it doesn't screw that guy, screw that woman, screw that organization. Like, they don't know if they don't know how good I am.
That's right.
Yeah.
They don't take the time to talk. Yeah, absolutely. I love that. That's a great application.
But definitely look into Mel Robbins, because that whole thing is that reframe for life is just very helpful for
powerful and simplistic.
Kids, husbands, in-laws, family, friend, like to work, across the board.
Yes,
It's like
yes.
chef's kiss.
Yes, totally agree. Yes, I totally agree. And I think it speaks to all generations at different times of their life, right?
Absolutely.
Because like
Absolutely.
Cyndi and I are obviously at a different stage in our life. And when I listen to Mel Robbins, I think to myself, and I was just talking to a colleague about this the other day, that when I was younger, I don't know that I could have applied those same thoughts of let them, because in many cases, I wonder, would I have learned everything that I learned today if I didn't take on some of that. But then now, as I'm in this stage of my life, I'm kind of like where you're talking about there, Ali. I'm like, I'm not going to wrap myself up in what everyone else thinks about me. It's what do I think about myself? And, what am I trying to do? How am I trying to project? And it's like a self awareness. And so I don't know that my younger self would have embraced what she's saying. But I'm glad she's saying it so that the younger generation maybe learns a different lesson than I learned, or maybe,
I
I'm not
would
sure, Cyndi, how
agree.
you feel. Yeah.
I totally agree with you, Linda. And also you made a great point. I don't know if I would have been where I am right now without, sort of the mindset that I had. I'd be in a different place. But I do love that when I hear my daughter and her roommates, her best friends, talking about things, they do seem to be more attuned to self-advocating or advocating for each other.
Yes.
My son and my daughter-in-law, the same thing. And so, yay.
Yes,
Yay.
exactly.
So good for
Yes,
the
celebrate
millennials,
it.
for Gen Zs, and for future generations who will self-advocate.
Yeah.
I love that for them.
Yeah,
I
and I think
totally
Gen Zs are
agree.
going to show us like actually what the
Heck
definition
yeah.
is, because they're just so good at it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
They need to grow up a little bit more, but I think once they do, they're just going to be like, "Pull up, and we'll tell you exactly how to do it," because they understand. They get it. They get it in their
No.
bones.
I totally agree. Well, and I think, as you think about self advocacy and like, how would you, especially women, because women often struggle with advocating for
Yeah.
themselves. So, like, what advice or guidance, because not everyone was as fortunate as you are, Ali, in that you had a strong female dynamic in the household that
Yeah.
gave you, because, for me, I don't know that I ever felt like the victim mentality, but I will tell you that as a woman, I have felt very intimidated in situations where I'm like, this makes me feel really uncomfortable simply because I'm a woman. And to your point, not because I'm not strong, not because I couldn't take care of myself, but because I'm a woman, I felt more vulnerable. And so talk a little bit about how do you help other women thinking about this who maybe didn't have the strong foundation or background that you had?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I think about it from a bunch of different frameworks, but the one that I usually go to first is Shonda Rhimes, the writer and creator of
Mhm.
Grey's Anatomy. She did a great speech about women having a responsibility to brag instead of hide, and how our intention or our instinct is to hide, to be safe, right? To make ourselves
Yeah.
smaller. Like that's
Yeah.
Glennon Doyle talks about that too a lot, as women are conditioned to try to make themselves small in the world instead of
Yeah.
owning their space and really breathing into everything that they can be. And when I talk to young people, especially like again, I work with a lot of interns, work with a lot of newer folks at the company. I talk to them about like you have to be able to back it up. Like don't just
Right.
brag.
Yeah. Yeah.
Don't just be like, I'm the best salesperson and then like never have sold anything, right? Like you can't do that. But like if you have done XYZ, for example, let me do it right now. When I joined sales, I had never done sales before. I was told by my boss, by other sales executives that had been at the company for years and had mentored me, everybody kind of holistically around me, don't worry. In your first year, you will not hit your number. Expect to hit your number. It's possible year 2, but year 3 is when you can expect to hit your number.
Sure.
And year 1, I hit 130% of my number.
We'll
So,
see.
we'll see. We'll see. So,
That's
like,
right.
I think
Right.
that also not falling into others' expectations for ourselves. I think
Yes.
coming in with a chip on the shoulder is a gift. To prove what can't be done, like what hasn't been done already, but that you can do. I always
Right.
love to prove that and to really double down because both of you all know that I don't stop at sales, right? Like I do sales and then I do all the other things. So like I help with the interns, I help with the nonprofit. We have a MS walk that I am emceed last year and captain every year. So I try to keep my fingers busy in a lot of different places. And with that, the only reason why I can keep doing that is because I deliver on the sales side, if that makes sense. So like I'm able to do all the things because I deliver. So like that's the kind of bragging that be here for. Be here to brag about all the things. Because I think that's one thing that the Gen Zers that I've seen that I think the trap they can fall into is they're really good at self-advocacy. But if you can't back it up, you're not really putting yourself in a good place. You kind of can undercut your own self.
It's a really good point. Yeah.
I think too, in that story as well, Ali, you're modeling that just because this is how things have always happened, we'll see. You know, and then you've set the bar a bit higher, and you've also said, hey, you know, I'm an individual, and so my goal is going to be different than everybody else's goal. We're not going to spread it like peanut butter. We're going to individualize here, and I'm going to self-advocate. I'm going to make sure that I do what I can do to hit and exceed. So congratulations, that goal.
Yes.
Absolutely. And it's my own expectations, right? Like I could just do sales and check, I'm winning. But like I wouldn't be able to sleep at night if that was what I did because I know me. And so
it's more to you. Yes.
You know, like that there's just more to that. And so that's self-advocacy too, right? Like I could come in with a different manager that would have me say, you know, if you can be doing all this other stuff, why can't you be selling in those extra hours? And my truth is, if I didn't do that other stuff, I couldn't sell. Like I just wouldn't be able to.
That feeds your soul, right? To be able to.
Exactly. Yeah. And so to be able to share that with another manager, I would be very comfortable with doing that should I have to one day. But I love Bill Sherman, so hopefully never.
No, I love that for sure. What are some first steps that you might give advice to?
I was just wondering that.
Like because that is hard, and it's really kind of you know, you got to think about how are you building that confidence, how are you advocating. So, what's a good first step that you could give advice on?
Yeah, so I think that we're really what's helpful for everyone, but I think women in general, and I think I'm going to go back to everyone again. When we know ourselves, when we know what we're really good at, when we know what we're not really good at, when we know where we thrive, when we know the spaces that we soar in and the spaces that we stumble in, we're able to speak truly about who we are and what we can do. And so if you're like, I don't know who I am, like start with some journaling. I have my one question interview that's on my LinkedIn profile that I recommend. It's also on alimercier.com. That's all about kind of getting to know people. And it's literally, what are the top 3 things that stand out the most to you about me? That's a question that I asked. I probably asked like 75 people that question, maybe more.
I like that.
But I encourage young people to ask that question to at least 10 folks.
A great idea.
Yeah, it's helpful because it really gives a reflection back. And for me, when I first started doing this exercise, and this is a little tangential, but I found out that people that knew me very well would say things like, you're smart, you're sweet. And the people that knew me kind of more on a first impression basis would be like, you're fiery, you're strong. And where at first I was like, well, I want them to know that I'm smart. I kind of was like, where are my 10-letter vocabulary letters that I can weave into my first impression conversations? And then I realized that I'd rather be approachable than smart. And so I started to be much more deliberate actually about bringing my sweetness into my first impressions because I am just like a little belly of a person. Like I am very, very sweet, and that's just true. And I come out very strong, and so people don't tend to necessarily know that about me, except for that I'm like
first impression.
Yeah, exactly. But now I'm like, hey, welcome to the sales org. I'm Ali. Do you have any questions? And so like, even if it's coming on strong, they're still like, help. There's probably something sweet there, right? So
I love that.
Kind of knowing yourself.
I have a follow-up to this. And so I think self-advocacy sometimes too is knowing when you need to take a step back, when you need to take a breath to get back to being able to, you know, go full force again. So can you share anything that you have to share with us on that as well?
Absolutely. So that 130% year comes with a bad story too. So when I did that, my first year of sales, 130%, I leaned into something that happens in the sales world, or kind of like fast speed places. I'm sure it happens in like advertising and that sort of thing, which is this like mania that can happen in the last quarter, right? So I leaned into it because it feels good. As a person that is the daughter of an alcoholic, like we like those feelings. The feelings that are yummy. And so that first year, I leaned all the way into that. And the problem with leaning all the way into that is it's really bad for my brain. And so when I did that, I also like my neurologist was laughing at me because I hit 130% of my number leaning into the mania. I bought a house. I traveled for the first time since the pandemic. I moved. I presented at a conference. I worked a booth. And then I called my neurologist and I was like, why isn't my brain working? It's like, you can't tell a woman, you can't. And it's just, so MS has been this really prankster gift from the standpoint of you have limits and figure out how to work within them. And when I said that out loud, when I said it just now out loud, immediately what I thought of is the art that comes from limitations. And I think that multiple sclerosis has forced me into a little bit of a frame that I have to work within. But given that frame, I know how to kind of break the rules and make some music and make it an art piece too. I don't even know where the metaphor is going, but I that's what I'm like, mixed media in every direction. I know how to do that. And I know how to play around with that. So it's the self-advocacy comes from a hard lesson, which was that December, I was like, I'm not okay. Like, I wasn't sure if I was ever going to come back to myself, Linda. I remember a conversation with you, and you were, and there was a comment about like, you know what, that
maybe not being in sales. Like,
I was like, I can't do it.
Mm-hmm.
Exactly. And it's only because I was able to say to leaders in the organization, like, look, I can be a powerhouse, but you need to like just clap and believe like I'm Tinkerbell. Like, and really just know that I'm dedicated to excellence. Know that I'm always going to be not shooting for 100%. I'm going to be shooting for 143%. That's what I happened to get last year. But it's also Mr. Rogers' number. It's 143. It's I love you because I is one letter and love is 4 and you is 3. So I love that. And I'm just like, 143 is my goal. And if I get to 343, that's cool too. I'm not mad about that. But like, I don't need to have a leader worry that I'm not going to try. Like the seat is I'm so deeply aware of how privileged I am to have the seat I have with the access to the amount of money I can make for my family that I can have.
Yeah,
that
absolutely.
For me to not try is for me to say screw you to another person that didn't have the opportunity to sell in the seat. And I couldn't do that.
Are you ready to take your podcast to the next level? Let LJM Productions help you sound your best. We specialize in podcast editing, production, audio restoration, and mixing, ensuring every episode is polished, professional, and ready to wow your audience. Whether you're just starting out or a seasoned podcaster, we'll handle the technical details so you can focus on sharing your voice. Partner with LJM Productions today and hear the difference. Reach out to ljmproductionsco@gmail.com for a free quote.
I want to ask you about the question. So, Ali, you're very fortunate in that you have a very understanding boss. And Cyndi, you're very fortunate. You have an understanding boss as well. She tends to... Cyndi's her own boss, obviously, but I have a friend who was sharing a story with me where she was going through a time when her mother was very sick and eventually died. When she was really struggling, and especially that first year afterwards, because I know for me, the first year after my mom passed away, it was really hard, to just kind of reconcile a little bit. And so she was going through a tough time, and she went to her boss and she said, "Listen, I'm just struggling a little bit with this. I just need some help in all of this. To your point, Allie, I will deliver on everything I said I will deliver on. I will take care of everything, but I need a little help in balancing all of this out." Unfortunately, in her situation, what ended up happening is that this person kind of then took a different, almost like she couldn't handle the job. So suddenly it was pulling projects away or telling people, oh, we have to cut her some slack. We need to do this. And that's not what she needed. What she needed was for someone to say, I understand. I've got your back. So talk a little bit about how we can give some advice to leaders. And in this case, her leader is a male. And I do think sometimes males may struggle a little bit with the female emotion because they assume that our emotions can be weakness and that we need them to save us. And we're just being ourselves. We're just talking, right? We can save ourselves. So can you talk a little bit about what advice would you give for leaders? I'd love to hear both of your perspectives on that.
Yeah, I'll start just with two things. And then Ali, I'm really curious to hear what you have to say. Two things. The first one is curiosity. So sit with the person and say, Linda, and I'm just going to use you as an example, thank you for sharing what you're going through with me. It's really good and important for me to be aware of this. How can I support you? What would that look like? Yeah. How can, let's keep these lines of communication open. So curiosity is huge. And then empathy. I haven't been through losing my mom, but I can only imagine that's really difficult. So I am going to take a step back and try as hard as I can to put myself in your shoes of something so impactful and just be more intentional on the way that I support you as an individual. So those are just two things.
I love that. Yeah. What about you, Ali?
So I can be very tough on leaders. That's something that is just true about me. I've known about leadership for a long time. I got the leadership award in high school. I've worked at the leadership program for 10 years. I know a thing or two about leadership. And I'll share a story of my neighbor, weirdly. Well, not weirdly, because it's an awesome story. He's a captain of police. I'm not going to say his name because of obvious reasons, even though his name is like Chef's Kiss, like Captain Harmony. Picture that, the Captain Harmony. He's beautiful.
Sounds like a Marvel character.
Yeah, I mean, really, he might as well be. This man has been a captain of police. He's actually a telestaff client of ours. He's my client. I love him. He a few years ago started to really wrestle with the trauma of the other officers on the force, and his little Mel Robbins moment of let me was, okay, let me go back to school for therapy. And he went and got his master's to be a therapist on top of being a captain of police. And why I share that story is that it's especially true in public safety that we encounter trauma every day. But what I know about us as human beings from my own life and from stories of other people's lives, that we will at some point encounter our unwell self, our well self will encounter our unwell self. But there also is the risk of trauma. And there's also the risk of trauma by proxy. So like kids that never were in a school shooting, but have been in a school shooting drill, right? They carry trauma from those drills. Yeah. And so long story long, I think being a trauma-informed leader, regardless of who you are, is important. Further, I believe that leaders that have the most challenges in the space are leaders that act from a place of fear as opposed to a place of abundance. Yeah, and so it's really coming at it from abundance, from love, to Cyndi, excuse me, to your point, from curiosity. I like that's one of my core kind of values as a person. And I know that staying curious about what someone could be going through, because even if someone has gone through something that I've gone through, they, like my sister and I, we've gone through the same stuff.
Oh, but absolutely.
How we've dealt with it is so different. It's so different. And to hold that space and grace for the differences of what that shows up, and to not say it's a problem until it's a problem, and to not say it's a problem until it's a real problem. Not like oh, you were 5 minutes late to that meeting. I know you're having a hard time, but like, be on time. Like, don't be a dick, be like a human being that has compassion. Like, really, know that everybody's doing the best they can. And if you have someone that has previously delivered for you consistently, and they're like, hey, I'm having a hard time, just FYI, just be like, got it.
I got you. Yes.
Yeah.
And also, one more thing I would add too, gosh, we could talk about this all day too. And
I know.
One more thing I would add is leaders are humans. And so it's okay to be a human.
That's right.
I go back to my analogy, Linda, thanks for sharing with me, what can I do to support you? And by the way, if I'm not doing something that you need me to do, I'm human, and just know I'm in your corner, like your mom, right, Ali?
Yeah.
But if I'm not doing what you need me to do, please tell me, just let me know.
Yeah. No,
and
really
to be
great
that
advice.
Infallible, right? To be that, and that's vulnerable for a leader to do, right? Like I appreciate that. But the leader's also in a position of power. So I say, be vulnerable, leader. You do that
That's
thing.
right. That's
your
right.
job.
It's your job.
Yes.
That's right. It's your job. I totally agree.
Yeah.
Don't be in those roles if you're not prepared to take those jobs on. So no, I totally agree.
That's
Well, let's talk about what self-advocacy isn't. It isn't selfish, right? It's also not that something that only extroverts can do. I think there's a misunderstanding about the fact that it's, those who advocate for themselves are just extroverted people who are loud and aggressive and can self-advocate because they know how to prepare their thoughts and have those conversations. That it doesn't equal aggression, right? Because I do think that and women, I think probably get this more than anybody. Well, not just women. I shouldn't just say that. Women just experience this a lot. That when we're what's viewed as when we're assertive, we're viewed as being aggressive, right? So I think that there's a misconception about that. There's also this idea like you shouldn't have to advocate for yourself. Well, why should I have to? And I think, Ali, when you and I were talking about this, and Cyndi and I talked about this as well, when I was at the Massachusetts Conference for Women, one of the women in the audience asked a question of the panel, and she was from another country. I think she was from China. And she said, listen, in our culture, you do your job well, and then things happen. Then you get promoted, you get a pay raise, that's the way it happens. You don't self-promote, you don't self-advocate. That's just not the culture. And she said, I'm finding here in my role in the United States, that's not how it works here. Like I've got to constantly be, advocating for myself or nothing happens. And that's very uncomfortable for her because that's not what her culture is, right? So there's a piece of that as well that we don't have to advocate for ourselves, or maybe it is a cultural difference. And so how do we help support that? But I'm kind of curious, like, what are both of your thoughts on some of those things around like what self-advocacy isn't? Because we've talked a little bit about what it is, but let's kind of focus in on some of the things that it's not.
Ali, you go first.
Yeah, I think that self-advocacy can be seen as bragging. And like I just said, the Shonda Rhimes, don't hide, brag. But like, it's still, it could be seen as braggadocious. And like, I know like a lot of women are uncomfortable doing that. And again, like what I say to my young people that I talk to, I'm like, if you can back it up, it's not bragging. It's just sharing information.
Yeah.
And that's kind of a lighter way that I have it. I'm like, just share information with people and don't be shy about sharing said information, especially if it's really cool. But like, what self-advocacy is not, I don't know. I'm like, it's not, because it can be anything. Like, I want to be like, it can be being loud, it can be being quiet, it can be making friends in a lot of places in a very quiet way. It can be having a really great sponsor way up in the company that you dare to push yourself to send the email to.
What about, do you think, like, do you need to have permission to self-advocate?
No.
I think that's also another thing that it's not, right? It's, so you've got to wait for the right time to be able to have that opportunity to maybe share information.
And I have a kind of good story with that. The first time I asked for a raise, I was at the youth development agency, and it was 2010. And while 2008 was when the real like market crisis was because of our grant funding, where we were really struggling as an organization, was 2010. And I was living in New York City on a pittance of a salary, and I knew it wasn't the right time to ask for a raise, but I also knew that I deserved one. And so I went to the executive director and I said that much. I said, I know this isn't the time to ask for a raise. I know I deserve one. And I know that women usually do not ask for a raise. And if I don't do this when I feel capable, comfortable talking to you about it, then I'm making it less safe for people that don't feel comfortable and capable of talking about it coming behind me. And when I work with other people that are less comfortable self-advocating, what I find kind of breaks that is when I'm like, you're not just doing it for you.
Yes.
You're doing it for all the women that come behind you.
Yeah.
You're making it easier for all the women and women tend to be selfless in a lot of cases, right? And
you want to model and kind of bring along the other, other people in your same demographic.
Yeah. Exactly.
I love that.
It's true.
And
and Cyndi, I'm curious too, before, just as you're thinking about that as well, we also only think of self-advocacy sometimes in the workplace, right? But you and I were talking about this with Dr. Cooper about self-advocating in both your personal, in your healthcare, in your relationships. So maybe expand a little bit on that too.
Yeah, I mean, I remember, I'll just say, like last year when I went through a little bit of a health kind of curveball that I wasn't expecting, I did have to advocate for myself and I did have to ask more questions. And at a few points, I was like, gosh, I'm probably being a huge pain in the butt. But I thought, you know what, though? If I don't ask these questions, I really did feel like I was advocating for myself. And on the kind of the end of it, I felt like I came out better. But it did feel very, it did feel uncomfortable. I'm not going to lie. And, just advocating to be able to say, to some amazing people that I work with in my business, you know what, I'm going to have to take a little bit of a step back and start saying no to some things.
And I think it is really important, right, for us to remember that self-advocacy isn't just about the workplace, and it isn't about pay either, right? That's not like, I think sometimes we get caught up in like it only is for these certain buckets of things, when the truth is it's like it's self-advocating for what's important for you, right? What's important to you and for you.
And this might be a little bit of a silly story, but this popped into my head when I was so there was a girl that we grew up with that was a really terrible bully, and that like in 5th grade she was like, be our friend. And then like 5 days later, she was like, no one talked to Ali and no one talked to me for the rest of the school year. Like real bad. Fast forward to freshman year of high school when we were going to that Manchester school that I told you was so scandalous to us. We had this bus, and like the best seats on the school bus were second to last in the aisle. That was like the best seat to have on the school bus because you were in the thick of everything and you knew everything. So I had that seat, and she came up to me and she said, move in. And I said, no, you can sit inside, but I have this seat. And
good for you.
What happened in that moment was I didn't do it really on purpose, but I built so much confidence in myself for being able to stand, and because she didn't know what to do with it. She was like, oh, and she sat inside. She sat on the window. But what I also know is that there were girls who had been picked on by this girl for years who came up to me afterwards that said, if you can stand up to her, now I know that I can.
I love that.
And like, it's just the ability to do this work in our personal life, in our health, in our professional life, is just going to change the world. Like more women graduate college now than men. So if we're really our CEO is a woman, our president's a woman, like we have a lot of power if we take it, like dare to take it, dare to grab it, because we deserve it.
I agree. No, I love it. That is great. Well, what are like 3 takeaways you'd like listeners to remember about self-advocacy?
I guess the first one is like it's kind of related to what I was saying in the last episode. My silly little sayisms of gravy. Like just do it. It's something that you just need to do. Like what the hell? Like write the email, pretend you're not going to send it, and then send it. Like whatever the way you need to psych yourself up. Play your favorite song, dance on your top of your toes for like 10 minutes before you do it, but like pump yourself up and then do it. So just do it is my first one. Second one, when you feel uncomfortable just doing it because you're like, this is entering a space that I feel like I'm not whatever it is, not worthy of, not ready for, not excited to enter, like any of those things. Like it just doesn't feel comfortable to me. Okay, don't do it for you. Do it for all the women that come behind you. Do it for your kids. Do it for your niece. Do it for your cousins. Like,
I like it.
Do it for the little kids in school that you're like, oh, that first grader when you were a fifth grader, right? Like, do it for those kids, or picture your own self. I keep pictures of myself as a kid around me, and I'll put that up and I'll say, do it for her.
I love that.
That's great. Yeah.
Right? Because she does that. Like little 5-year-old Allie, she deserves someone fighting for her. She's a queen.
Yeah.
And then the last thing that I'll say in the self-advocacy realm, I guess, is, I mean, I recommend Glennon Doyle's book Untamed. It's really about in her podcast, We Can Do Hard Things. It's about just unleashing yourself from what should be. And I guess that's the last takeaway is don't
like that.
Fall into a trap of what should, or don't fall into a trap of everybody else is doing it, so why can't I?
Right.
Don't fall into a trap of status quo. Because why would you do it to yourself? You're so much better than that. You're worth so much more than that. And just don't do it. Bring your gift to the world, because the world will be better for it.
I love that too. Yeah, you're keeping something from the world by not putting yourself out there. So 100%. If that's how you need to think about it too, then think about it that way.
I love that.
Ali, you're such a force.
Oh my gosh, right? I know. I love having her on the podcast. And of course, we're going to have her back again for sure. And we'll, Ali, how can people contact you? So you've got your LinkedIn profile, but you also casually mentioned your website. So how can people connect with you?
So LinkedIn or alimercier.com. My website, it kind of looks janky. It's not super up to date, but I plan on kind of refurbishing it, which is not a word, but you guys understand what I'm saying.
Hey, you can. I have
very
a friend,
technical.
Nick Kittle, who he says, if you want to make up your own words, you can make up your own words, and he makes up his own words all the time. So that can be your word, Ali.
I'm like, as long as I'm communicating, I don't care if I'm using actual language. That's what I
right.
say. Like,
understand.
If my 18-month-old doesn't need words, I don't need words. He knows.
Right.
I know when he needs milk. He's very clear.
Allyism.
That's it.
But you can reach out to me, alimercier.com, or on my LinkedIn profile. Very happy to talk about all of these things and more. I'm very, very nerdy about pretty much everything. So if I'm not nerdy about it, if you're nerdy about it, I could probably get nerdy about it.
Ali, I know I've introduced a few people to you, and they've come back to me and said, "Oh my gosh, thank you so much for introducing me to Ali." So you have a lot to give, and thank you for being so willing to share that with us and with our community. And
absolutely,
hopefully people who hear this will share.
Yes.
Share this with other people.
Shining. Absolutely.
Yeah. I mean, we're all here for the legacy work, right? Like let's talk from the gravestone back, and that's I'm here to help everybody in living the biggest, fullest life that they want for themselves, not that I want for them, but that they want for them.
I love it. Well, you are always a welcome guest on our podcast. We love having you on here. And Ali mentioned a couple of, she talked about Glennon Doyle. We talked where Cyndi and I always talk about Mel Robbins. But Brene Brown also has Dare to Lead, which is another really good one. And then she's got a really good TED Talk out there on the power of vulnerability. That is a good one to listen to. And then for those of you who struggle, I know I'm one of those, on Pay Up. There's a woman by the name of Reshma. I'm going to pronounce her last name wrong, but Sajani. She has a book out there called Pay Up, The Future of Women in Work and Why It's Different Than What You Think. And she also has a great TED Talk out there on Teach Girls Bravery, Not Perfection. So we'll put some of these resources out there for you, for our women out there, for our men out there who want to learn. Just in general, we'll put some of these out there, because there's some really great resources that can just help give you and take what you can from them and leave the rest behind, right?
Yeah, that's great, Linda. And it just one final thought, because you were talking about Teach Girls. What was that?
Teach Girls Bravery, Not Perfection.
So I think that's especially why it's so important for girls or women to self-advocate, is because for a long time we were really good girls in the class with our hands like this, behaving and staying quiet. And the boys were disrupting and getting what they wanted, right? They were moving their bodies and doing their things and saying whatever they wanted in the bathroom, right? But like we knew how to behave. Don't behave. Stop behaving, girls.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. That's right. I love it.
No behaving anymore. Behaving is old news.
I don't
like it. I don't like it.
I love it. Well, as always, we love you and we appreciate you being here. And Cyndi, always good to see you.
You too, Linda. This was fun.
This was a fun one. I love these episodes. Yeah, this was really good. So no, good topic, good guest for sure. So, but we'll be back for another episode. And we are super excited to be back in our new season, and we have some amazing guests lined up. So if you are not a subscriber, subscribe, follow our LinkedIn page, and
share it with
all
a
of our
friend.
guests because man, they are amazing. So yes, and share it with a friend.
Yeah,
love to spend time with all of you. So.
Thank you for being here today, Ali.
Oh, yes. Thank you so much for having me. So glad.
Yes. All right. We'll see you all next time.
Thanks so much for joining us for this episode of the HR Her Resources podcast. We're so happy to have you with us on the journey. Music and production by Logan Misegadis of LJM Productions. We'd also like to thank our intern, Lauren Banas, for creating our logo and supporting our social media postings. If you'd like to connect with Logan or Lauren, you can find their information in the show notes. If you found value in our discussion and think someone else might as well, please follow and subscribe to our LinkedIn and share with a friend. Until our next episode, please take care and continue to support one another.